Leaders telling their stories right now on the Leadership Voice. Welcome to the Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's theme is storytelling, and we have everything leaders need to get started. Joining us are storytelling guru Jay Golden, as well as two storytelling CEOs, Julie Hudash of Team Kids and Eric Goodman of Mountain View Services. We also have a leadership lesson about mastering the leadership conversations. Let's get things started with our quote of the day. Today's quote comes from Steve Jobs. The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda for an entire generation to come. Our first guest today is Jay Golden. As the founder of Retellable, Jay coaches and elevates founders, innovators, and social entrepreneurs. His storytelling clients range from entrepreneurs to Fortune 10 companies. His individualized approach is transformative and universally applicable, helping executives develop a catalog of inspirational anecdotes. Please welcome to the show, Jay Golden.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Jay, it's great to have you here on the show to share your wisdom around storytelling. Could you share with us what makes you so passionate about storytelling? Where did this come from?
I was a traveler. After college, I set out for the world, and I ended up, through a windy path, I ended up in South America. And there was a moment in the jungles of Colombia where I was sitting with a young Japanese student. It was a very, very rainy day, and I remember the corrugated metal roof of the cafe was being pounded with rain, rat-tat-tat, pounded with rain, and we were speaking together. But neither of us spoke each other's language. I didn't speak any Japanese and he didn't speak any English. But together we spoke Spanish to one another in our cobbled Spanish. And it was one of those special moments that years later I remembered as an example of the many travels I had taken and this very important traveler's commerce of stories, the big moments in our lives that we remember when we look back on our experiences. And after many years in technology, I paused and said, it's that's missing. It's these stories of how we connect and how we create visions in the world and how we share with people who we are that make the difference. And so I set off to help leaders to understand their own lives and how they connect with those around them.
So share with everyone, what is so powerful about the stories?
What's so powerful about stories are that they are both memorable and also transformational. When you take someone on a journey through a story is not just something you say or a message that you drop or an explanation of how something works. A story is why this matters to me and why it can matter to you. And so a story is something that delivers a little module of change, a small module of transformation that anchors in memory, and that days later or weeks later or months later, your audience remembers and they think about it as they make their decisions.
So a lot of executives probably think, I don't need stories, I can just say what's on my mind, speak the facts. What do we need to tell those executives?
I've worked with a lot of executives all around the world. And I often get this statement, well, people don't have time for stories. They're very busy. They don't need to have the stories. They need to know the facts. And I agree. They do need to know the facts, but they're never going to remember them. And so while your audience might be saying, oh yes, because they respect you, they appreciate your charisma and your power and what you've done in the world, to truly respect their time is to actually convey something meaningful and memorable that's going to transform how they see the world. And that's why I support leaders to gather those essential stories and consider how they match to their most critical messages to deliver those facts in ways that will be remembered.
And so as a leader, should they turn to a story?
Turn to a story when you are facing a real challenge. I always say to my clients, I say, number one, you think about who are you talking to? Where are they? Where are they? What do they care about? What's most important to them? And then you think about, where am I? What's most important to me right now? What am I thinking about? What wakes me up in the morning? What really guides me? What's the greatest challenge? And then you create a story that connects the two. So you create a story that brings your audience into alignment around the challenge that you see they are facing and that you really care about. And through the story, leveraging the essence of brain science, a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of cortisol, not too much, a little bit of stress that focuses their attention, you then bring them through into a transformation, into that oxytocin, that connectivity, that payoff, that then results in memorability increased, and action that can guide them in the years to come.
So clearly, the ability to tell stories, the ability to lean into stories, to share stories, to leverage stories, clearly a powerful tool for executives to develop. So how does an executive develop a story?
You develop a story by considering the things that you're already saying. What are the things that are most important? What are the things you say over and over again? Those messages that you try so hard to get across. It might be for your team members. It might be for your partners. It might be for the bigger audiences, the wider group of people that you're speaking to. But you think first, what are those three things that you're always saying? And then instead of saying them over and over again, you place them in your story. That's the arrival. It's not the starting point. You build to that message so that your audience can learn with you, discover with you, and then the payoff is the thing that you most want them to understand anyway.
So they end up discovering and feeling those things that you discovered and felt when you first came to those realizations.
Exactly. And the most important thing that I find is you have to give context. It's not just content. You have to go back in time and show how the world was before. If you show how the world was before you made this discovery, before this transformation happened, then the journey matters. But if you're always trying to run forward, no, we're forward-thinking people. We're always looking at the future. That's fine. You can tell them all about the future, but I'll tell you what, they're never going to remember it, and it's not going to be actionable for them.
So what's the formula for a good story?
I like to think about a story in terms of the seasons. So think about the seasons. So here's summer. It's summertime. Isn't it so nice? That was how the world was in summer, how pleasant it was, what a great day that was. Then something happened. It's kind of the then one day moment. That begins fall. We descend. We go into discovery. Things change a little bit. Here we go. We're dropping down into the valley of change. And then we go into winter. Winter is the innermost cave, as Joseph Campbell said. It's the place of not knowing. People feel that they have to be the ones that know. These experts, CEOs, I have to be the one that knows, otherwise I'll be vulnerable. They won't trust me. The opposite is true. You go into that innermost cave, into that winter time where you do not know. You don't have to stay there forever. Please don't, in fact. That's where the cortisol is. But stay there for a moment, for an instant, for a consideration. And then a great question. And it's from that winter into that hope for spring, that first sprout. That's where the until finally moment is. That's where your message is. That's where your insight is, in that until finally moment. And then you're not quite done with the story. You come out of that valley. You come into springtime, and then you head into summer again. So then one day, until finally, and ever since then. That's the module of change for a story.
And it's the ever since then part is the part that if you do the story well, you've really taken them through the journey of that story.
The ever since then is the place of vision. It's the place of yearning. It's where we want to go. It's that place across the valley where we're headed. But we don't start there. We have to start with how the world was before and take them on a journey of their own yearning, of their own inspiration, come through into that change, and the ever since then is what anchors the change. Because the until finally, you're really you've now come through, but it's that ever since then that enables you to detail how you get through that transformation and what it really looks like that truly anchors the memory.
And so the audience then starts saying, so that's why you're so passionate about that, or so that's why that's so important.
That's right. They understand who you are, not just as a visionary, not just as a leader of people. In fact, the word leader comes from the Old English ledere. You know what ledere means?
Tell us.
Conduit. Ledere means conduit. You're not the one who knows. You're the one who studies. You're the one who enables. You're the one who guides into a pathway of possibility. You are the conduit into a new world.
So people watching this show are probably already starting to think about the stories in their lives and the stories that they could start incorporating into their messaging. How many stories should an executive keep on hand?
It's such a great question. I personally don't really start with a number. If I was going to say a number and you're just out of the blocks and say, how many stories should I have? Let's start with 8, okay? Let's start with 8. Let's start with your origin of why you do this work, your origin of how you came to this company, your origin of what you care about transforming in the world, and then get to things like your impacts, your favorite stories that you're doing as your story listening, not just storytelling, but story listening out in the world. Gather those impacts that depict what the transformation looks like on a daily basis. It might be through a friend, through a customer, through a partner, but again, same thing, coming through from winter into spring, always looking for the transformation. To me, one of the most important things about gathering stories are not those big stories. They're the little stories that come every day as life is trying to tell you something. So I recommend to people I work with that they write down those little stories from every day, the little things that kind of tug you. Say, hey, this is meaningful, and don't decide right away what they mean. Wait until you are a day before you have to get up on stage or go to an interview or stand in front of your board of directors, and then think, what's a recent relevant moment that's going to keep my conversation and my presentation fresh? Because this is a big thing. People come in, okay, now I'm going to tell you my big story, but unless it's fresh and relevant, people are going to think it's canned.
That makes sense. And so for executives who are watching this, they shouldn't be thinking in terms of, I need this many, X number of stories, but rather I need to start assembling and start thinking through a collection of stories.
Absolutely. It's so much about your collection. And the thing is, you might have a go-to story, right? A story that you tell, it's your founding story, or it's the story of why you do what you do, or why you wrote this book, or what's changed you and put you on this big stage. I always suggest that we start there. Let's go back to that story. Let's look back in time. Let's go back and anchor a certain moment, recreate in sensory detail so we can feel that certain moment and consider, what did I leave by the side of the road? Because a lot of times what happens is those stories become cardboard for the teller, and they're just faking it. That's the thing, is you see those great stories, they're faking it a little bit because they know when people are going to say, oh, wow, gosh, I can't believe it. Let's go back and make those fresh. Let's go back and find a new moment where you were walking by the sidewalk and you said, wait a second, there's a new discovery. Or where you met a new friend, there's a new discovery. Add that to your constellation of stories so it guides you in a new and fresh way. It's going to make you come alive again.
Terrific. Jay, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. We're going to stick around because we're going to have a leadership panel when we bring Julie and Eric up here. You'll stick around for that, right?
I sure will.
Terrific.
See you.
Thank you. It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from Forbes.com. Did you know that stories are remembered 22 times more than facts alone? It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown comes from fluencyleadership.com. Storytelling is an art form that when done well creates an empathic and emotional connection with the audience. Today we bring you the 5 elements of a great story. Number 1, first, we create the situation. So there I was. This is the time and place of your story. Second, we discuss the problem. I wanted to, but. Here you discuss what the problem was. Third, we share the action we took. And so, and then. Here we discuss what you did and why. Then we share the outcome until finally these things happen. Here we discuss what changed. And lastly, we need to make a connection with the story by saying something like, and because of this, I have always been this way. This is the reason you told the story, the morals, and what you want others to remember. And there you have the 5 elements of a great story. Don't go anywhere. We have Julie Hudash in the studio right after a word from the Giles O'Malley Center for Leadership. The Bringing Learning to Work program is our way of connecting the faculty of Cal State Fullerton with the business community of Orange County and Southern California. We have over 72 training programs that are available via distance or face-to-face. And the faculty come to your company and they deliver the training to your employees.
The Bringing Learning to Work program is really fundamentally, it's leadership programming. We do diversity and emotional intelligence training. We partner with Cal State Fullerton because they had subject matter experts in these fields, and we're really fortunate and privileged to be able to do that.
Many companies can't afford training and development personnel, and so this is a great opportunity to leverage Cal State's faculty to help them develop their learning programs.
The leadership of the center and the students allow me to not only bring leadership development to my company, but allow me to interact with some amazing students who have grit, potential, and just amazing futures in front of them, and I get to take part of that. It's a wonderful feeling.
When your organization is ready to develop its talent, reach out to the Center for Leadership and we'll help get you there. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Julie Hudash. Julie is the CEO of the nonprofit Team Kids, which she founded in 2001. Julie makes a difference in the world through empowering our next generation of youth leaders, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists. Julie specializes in advancing systematic community change for youth, leveraging partnerships with business, government, education, and public safety. Please welcome to the show, Julie Hudash.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you, Jay.
Julie, thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences around storytelling with our viewers. Could you maybe start by telling us your story of how you started Team Kids?
Absolutely. It's a story from almost 25 years ago, and one that really found me thinking of how I wanted to make a difference in the life with kids, specifically vulnerable children, whether children are homeless or child abuse, and had a stint in grad school, and we were living in Des Moines, Iowa at the time, and had 4 young children, and I was pregnant with our 5th. The oldest was in 2nd grade, so if you do the math, we had a lot of little kids in our house. And our oldest daughter, Lauren, was finishing 2nd grade. And I got a message from the 2nd grade teacher that they were graduating from 2nd grade, which I just thought was absurd. You know, I just thought, don't you just go to 3rd grade? Why are we having a graduation and celebration and party for 2nd graders? And so they were going to be treated with this big roller skating party for graduating from 2nd grade. And it just hit me in such a way that it just seemed really ridiculous to have this big milestone celebration. And so I met with the teacher and I said, do we really need to have kind of this graduation celebration? And she said, this is sort of how we do things here. And I said, well, what if what if we find a way for the kids to actually earn it? What if we give them an opportunity to serve and be leaders, and this could be sort of a celebration rather than sort of a graduation? And I had a chance to bring 4 classes of second graders together and ask them to imagine what it would be like to be homeless, whether someone lost a job or there was a fire in their house. What would you need? And so we asked the kids, and I love they're 7 years old, that the one thing they needed was toys, books, clothes, and food. And so I had a chance to work with these 4 second grade classes, and each week they did a drive of toys or books or clothes or food. And for that month, we actually took a field trip with each second grade class where they brought all the donations that they had, and they toured the homeless shelter in the snow in downtown Des Moines. And they learned from a social worker that no matter how hard life gets, there are people that care, and there are people that will help you. And so what happened, instead of having a graduation, they had this amazing celebration of the work that they did, not the adults, that they came together and brought joy and helped children and families who were suffering. And the pride in these young kids, and knowing that they worked as a team and they accomplished something. They were on the 5 o'clock news in Des Moines, and they knew it mattered. And so a few years later, we moved to California in 2001. And I brought this project, this idea I had, to our kids' principal. So I don't know if it can happen again, but look what the kids accomplished. And so that was when, just a few months before September 11th, and we were in California and launched Kids Helping Kids, which became Team Kids. And that program, when 9/11 hit, really brought our police and fire partners together to where we are today. So Team Kids today, over 500,000 kids have participated in this Team Kids Challenge program, which is very similar to how it started. And we teach in California, all the way from Compton to New York and Harlem, where kids are trying to end racism. So the program really came from that, our origin story, and that sort of feeling that this isn't right, kids are so much more capable. And until now, really, research in the American Psychological Association that we're changing the way kids view their future and that they can affect change. And so that's the story, and it's really been a privilege to see it come together.
So who do you tell that story to?
Oh my goodness. I have so many audiences in my story because Team Kids works with so many folks. So it could be, a CEO of a company and sharing stories about other companies and corporate social responsibility. It could be the Deputy Commissioner of NYPD, where I'm sharing stories about building partnerships with kids and police and building police legitimacy and trust. It can be an educator, and I'm sharing a different story about connecting kids through their peers and school climate, so they're more apt to have higher attendance rates. So I kind of have a core group of stories that I align with who I'm talking to.
So how has storytelling really moved the needle for you and your career and for Team Kids?
I think it's been the most important tool that I've used, I think intentionally early on, because that was the way that it could be personalized. The person I'm talking to kind of gets to go on that journey of kids believing in themselves where they didn't be, before. I use stories not just with me, but with my peers. So sometimes I'll go into a meeting with a police chief, but I've talked to another one of our partners who's contacted that chief before, peer-to-peer, and shared his story or her story. So connecting those stories really make it personal and help build those connections. Most recently, I am really healthy now, but I had a diagnosis of a brain tumor 2 years ago. And that really flipped my stories in a real personal way. And so those stories, that journey has been really powerful, being vulnerable and being authentic and having the chance of a second life and being healthy, but really connecting with people at a deeper level through really sharing challenges, not being the leader that has all the answers, but someone who had to be on a journey to walk again. And I find those stories have been helped not only personally, but professionally to really build, like I said, really deep connections through story and being vulnerable.
So how many stories do you have?
That's such a great question. And I was thinking about it when you said that, because I think there's experiences and stories. So when I think of like phases in my life of, being a tomboy and an adventurous kid and running track at USC, working in corporate America, being a mother of 5, starting Team Kids. So I have these like chapters of my life where there's so many. But when you say stories, I really think of like experiences that you really think of the meaning. How did that impact my life? Is there a nugget that could be a gift to someone else? So I would probably say probably 40 good stories in different chapters and what that, what it meant to my life. Whereas it's not just a story of like, hey, guess what happened to me on the way home? You could say that's a story. But I think when in this conversation, it's really about something that you really think about how that impacted who you are or who you think you are. And it's very powerful.
So in your day-to-day life, in your work with Team Kids, as you work with people in the community, how do you know when it's time to lean into a story?
Honestly, I feel like when I prepare remarks or things I say, I honestly, so often I'm like, you know what, this is what I was gonna say, but let me just tell you a story that happened yesterday. I find like the space and place that I have. I did that recently because we have the story about Sam, who was 7 years old, and he moved here from Iran with just his mother and his brother. And he was in his school, he didn't speak any English, and he really had a hard time assimilating, and Team Kids was the first thing that was there. So it was the first English words he learned, they were the first friends he learned. So flash forward, he's a college student looking for an internship, and he's looking through the screen and he sees Team Kids, he's like, there's no way it's the same. And in fact it is, and he became an intern. Now we've hired him as a coach, and he just said, it is such a privilege for me to be up on stage and deliver this program to kids, and hopefully at the same level that it had an impact in my life. And shortly after he was teaching, and a young Persian boy who had heard his story and just moved up came running up to him because of seeing himself in Jay and being authentic about our stories. And so anytime I speak, I could go on about our research, or I could tell a story about Coach Sam, and I think the story is way more powerful.
I want to thank you, Julie, for joining us on this conversation. And we're going to have a panel here in just a few minutes, and you'll stick around for that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What a privilege to be here.
Absolutely. It's now time for our leadership example. Today's leadership example comes from blueleads.com. We bring you the top 10 most famous storytellers of all time. Don't go anywhere. We have Eric Goodman coming up next. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Eric Goodman. As president and CEO of Mountain View Services, Inc., a leading healthcare supply and distribution company serving more than 500 care facilities for developmentally disabled adults and children throughout Southern California, Eric's mission is to provide the highest quality products and services available to his clients so they can provide the highest quality service to their residents. Eric fosters his core belief in building relationships with the community and serves on several prominent nonprofit organizations. Please welcome to the show, Eric Goodman.
Thank you very much. Thanks
Eric,
for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. Tell us your story and how it has inspired you at Mountain View Services.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me share. So when I was 15 and a half years old, I was diagnosed with a very rare condition called Schumann's kyphosis. It was requiring me to have a surgery to fuse my spine. I was actually placed in a full body cast from the neck down for 9 months, and I had to have physical therapy to learn how to walk again. So my company, as you mentioned, Mountain View Services, we now currently serve over 500 facilities for developmentally disabled adults, children, and seniors. So my life's work, my mission, and my passion is because of my own disability, and that's why we do what we do today to help so many people.
When you tell that story to people, what kind of reaction do you get?
Yeah, they're usually shocked because I don't look disabled, so if they see me now, they don't think that I'm disabled, but I currently have 2 metal rods on my body that's on both sides and connected at my shoulders and then down to my spine, or to my ribs, and my spine is fused. So if you seen me today and you met me, you wouldn't know I was disabled, but I'm clearly disabled, and so when they hear my story, they always see me and they're shocked to find out my history.
How do you think it affects the relationship you develop with each person?
Yeah, obviously, it's because we have so much passion for what we do, and because the people we care for, I'm able to be empathetic about what they've gone through, and I think that makes them connect with us and know that I really am passionate about serving people with disabilities and anybody that needs help in the community.
It's resulted in an incredible market share for your organization, right?
Yes, it has been. Yeah, we've received many honors the last few years, which were amazing. I've spoke at many events, keynoted, and done a lot to share my story publicly. And it's because I want to get the word out about what we do and who we serve and how we help people. And I want to be able to do more of that. So sharing my story publicly has given me the platform to be able to do that.
And so how has storytelling played into the success and your entire entrepreneurial career? We kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. The last 2 years, I would say, a lot. We've been in business for 37 years. And prior to probably about 2.5 years ago, I didn't share my story publicly. I never had. I had never shared it openly with anyone. I had always kind of forgot about it. Really, to be honest with you, I think I had a lot of PTSD. It was so traumatic, being in that body cast for 9 months and being from 3 years old to 15 years old disabled, and I'm trying to figure out what was wrong. Had leg braces and just had a really hard childhood living with my disability, that after the surgery was over, I kind of didn't want to remember it anymore or talk about it or think about it. I just wanted to be normal. And then a few years ago, when I started storytelling and I started sharing it publicly, then I think people really took notice to what we were doing as an organization. It tied in well with who we serve and who we care for. And I think people knew that I was being genuine, authentic, and that I had a lot of empathy for people who have disabilities or seniors, anybody that needs our care. So sharing it publicly really kind of elevated us to the next level, and the business has really taken off the last few years from it.
So all of your clients, when they hear your story and they get to know you, there's a feeling like Eric understands what we do.
Yes.
Eric understands what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes, exactly.
And that must play a wonderful role. So how many stories do you have?
So
that's
the big story. That's obviously my story that I share and tell when people meet me or connect with me on LinkedIn. They watch the video of my story and they hear that story, and that's like my big story. But there's so many stories that have come out of that story of people that I have met and things that have happened in my life because of that story, that now I'm starting to work on other stories of sharing things that have happened and how one thing has led to another. I don't know how many stories I have now, but I'm currently writing my memoir, and I'm about 6 chapters in, and I'm amazed at every time I sit down and write with my writer that we have another story that comes from that original story, and it just seems like one after another they play, on top of each other, and it's grown so a lot.
So this is a process.
Yes.
And the stories are always evolving?
Yes.
When is a story completed?
I don't know that it's ever completed, especially now that I've been sharing mine public and I've met every person has an amazing story. I've never met someone that doesn't have something in their life that has just been an amazing thing that they could share, but a lot of people aren't comfortable sharing it publicly. So we never know about their stories. We never hear them. We never know what they've gone through. We never know. And then we meet them and we finally do hear their story or get them to share, and then of course it changes our outlook on everything with them. But I think there's so many opportunities for us to share more of those stories and for people to be authentic and open and do it. But it's hard. When I shared that story publicly and stood on stage, I didn't know how it was going to affect me, and that I was going to break down and be so emotional over something that happened 33 years ago that I had pretty much forgot about. And then now I tell the story multiple times a week because I'm always asked to.
So how do you leverage stories in your life and in your company?
Yeah, we use them to share about what we do. So everything now, when we tell about the company, it's storytelling. We're not selling, we're sharing what we do. We're saying, here's our story, this is why we do it. So then people understand better. I think with relationships, I've met some of the most amazing, the closest people in my life, my inner circle now, the last few years have been from people that I've shared my story with or they've shared theirs, and it's a way for us to connect. So the relationships that I have in the community, here with Fullerton, with other businesses, with nonprofits in Orange County have all come out of sharing that story. So it's made a huge impact in my life. I mean, without sharing it publicly and without building on those stories and meeting those people, those relationships today have been, I mean, it made a huge change for me.
So how do you pull these stories together?
Yeah, it's sharing them publicly, and then now I'm still working on with the book, and then with a storytelling coach, I'm still working on how to tie my personal story with my business, and then stories that have come out of the business, how we tie those all together to share it as one cohesive story, like my disability, the company's disability, and what we do in the community. We serve a lot of nonprofits with our products and services, so those stories with the nonprofits always come back to be part of our story.
Without stories and storytelling over these past 3 years, where do you think things would be in your business?
I still think we'd be doing what we were doing because we have a lot of passion for what we do, because we do care for developmentally disabled adults, children, and seniors. But not sharing that publicly, I think there was a lot of time where we were probably making a bigger impact than our team realized, but we weren't sharing it publicly, so we weren't celebrating those. And now when we go to the office or when we go to events or we do things, I tell the team, and they know, I say, look at the difference, look at the impact we're making in the community with our services. And they can feel it through the stories that we're sharing, and it's really brought us all together much more than we were, say, 5 years ago.
So if someone were watching this show right now, and maybe they're not out there telling their stories, what are they missing out on?
Everything. I mean, the last 2 years, I would say in the 37 years we've been in business, the last 2 or 3 years have been the greatest years of my life and in my company, from just sharing that one story publicly at one event and that turning into me sharing it multiple times and meeting, like I said, so many people. I think you need to take that leap of faith to share your story or share your life with others, so then that way they'll make the connection with you, and then the relationships that come out of that would be, I mean, I can't imagine not having these people in my life now that are part of my storytelling group.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and experiences around storytelling. We're going to have you stick around because we're going to have a leadership panel here coming up in just a minute.
Great, thank you very much.
Perfect. It's now time for today's leadership lesson. Today I will talk about the conversations leaders need to master. I'm Jay Barbuto, and here is today's leadership lesson. Leadership in action is really about mastering the conversations that will define your organization's success and illuminate the path for a created future. To do this, there are 5 conversations that leaders need to master. The first conversation are those that build relationships. Leaders need to develop strong rapport and get to know others, to understand their ambitions and passions. Strong relationships enable leaders to develop talent and evoke loyalty, respect, and commitment, each resulting from mastering the conversations of relationships. The second conversations are those about possibilities. The world may seem destined for an inevitable and predicted future, but great leaders guide the conversations toward grand ideas and explore extraordinary possibilities. What we aspire towards as an inspirational future results from mastering the conversations of possibilities. The third conversations leaders need to master are those surrounding opportunities. Leaders must engage others in conversations towards activating the mechanisms that can realize aspirations. These developments become new services, new products, or new programs, each manifested from mastering the conversations of opportunities. The fourth conversations are those surrounding actions. These conversations assign tasks, confirm agreements, and make promises. Who will do it? To what standard will it be done? And by what deadline will it be completed? The groundwork for building integrity, scheduling operations, and making agreements result from mastering the conversations of actions. The fifth conversations are those required to manage breakdowns. When things don't go as planned or people haven't kept their promises, momentum towards goal achievement is interrupted. The best leaders will describe these moments as interruptions rather than failures. These conversations allow leaders to manifest course corrections and build resilience towards eventual goal achievement. Leaders foster agility and sustainable hope when they master the conversations of breakdowns. And there you have the 5 conversations: building relationships, imagining possibilities, realizing opportunities, taking actions, and managing breakdowns. Master these 5 types of conversations, and you will inspire a created future. I'm Jay Barbuto, and this has been your leadership lesson. We're back for our leadership panel. We have Jay Golden, Julie Hudash, and Eric Goodman back, so thanks for sticking around. We've got 3 questions. So, first question, Jay, you're going to answer first. What is the biggest storytelling gaffe that you have ever experienced?
Okay, here's one of my favorites. I was leading a big workshop, hardcore executives, CEOs, all the way around. It was one of my first workshops, and I was telling an opening story. And there I am with my opening story, and I get those points, and I finish the story, and then I move on to the next experience where we're all learning more about each other. And what I realized when the first person started sharing in the next experience is that I had forgotten the ending of my story. I had actually forgotten the ending of my story, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was watching the person talking to me, but I couldn't hear them because my ears were just buzzing with how terrible I was. And I had to decide in that very moment, was I going to let this take me over, or was I going to immediately and completely forgive myself and end strong?
Wow.
I chose the second one.
What about you, Julie? What was the biggest storytelling gaffe?
So it was a few years ago, we had a spot on Good Morning America in partnership with our firefighters for our Spark of Love toy drive. And we were in front of the Honda Center, and I was so excited because our fire chief came to do the spot with me. So we were with our Team Kids bus, a fire truck, and all these toys. And I was just so proud of our partnership and what the kids had accomplished. So I started in on my story, and I thought I was doing so good. And they were like, that's it. And I never had a chance for our fire chief to share his part of the story. So it was really like he didn't care, and I was thanking our partners, but it just really made me realize like timing and being aware that my time affects someone else's time, and so that was a big aha moment for me.
Wow. What about you, Eric? What was your biggest storytelling gaffe? He's going to say he never made it.
So I haven't had one yet, so I'm a new storyteller, but I think the biggest thing for me was I got up, I shared my big personal story. I got done with the story, and I was tying it into what we do with our company and how we help people. And Jay said to me, he said, wow, that's amazing. Your whole life story and your passion has to do with the business you created. I said, wow, I never realized that till you just said that. Unbelievable. So my story was there. I didn't even know it. I had been sharing a story about what we do to help people, and come to find out, my whole entire life career has been helping people and giving back because of my story.
So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of storytelling. Julie, you go first. Give us a do and a don't.
Okay, so I just think be vulnerable and be authentic. If you have a chance and a privilege to share a story, it's not about you looking like you have all the answers, is be vulnerable and give a gift to someone to think about and hopefully have it impact their life.
Eric, adieu.
Adieu, for sure. Being authentic, for sure. That's what I was going to say with hers. You have to be genuine, have passion for your story, and share it from the heart, because if you don't, it'll come across that it's not, that you've embellished that story, or it's not a true story. So you have to really have it from the heart.
Jay, another do.
Choose your moments very specifically and create a scene around you using 2 or 3 sensory details. Taste, touch, sound. Create that scene. But don't do too many of those stops along the way. If you do 5, 6, 7 of those stops, people get lost. And then they're looking at their watch and they're thinking, when's lunch? So create the sensory details, create the scene, but do it 2 or 3 times.
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
Just a little bit. Don't want to over-season it.
Yeah.
Julie, with some don'ts.
I think don't, again, not only make the story about you, but it doesn't have to be long. A good story doesn't have to be long. So I think really being aware of the time limits, back to my fire chief story, and knowing that your story is to deliver within an agenda of other people's stories. So I really think don't go too long, don't take too much space.
Mine's don't be afraid of the silence. Jay taught me really early on, which was amazing, was I talk fast and I talk a lot. So he would always say, pause, stop, think about it, let them feel the moment, and don't be worried about the silence when it's there, and it creates a huge impact.
Any other don'ts?
Don't forget to go back in time. A story is not just about moving forward. When you go back in time, you create contrast that makes your ending more powerful and the change more distinct.
That's great.
Good one.
All right, it's now time for the final word. This is where each of you get to share one final piece of advice or pearl of wisdom. And we're going to have Eric go first. So Eric, what is your final word?
Don't be afraid to share your real, authentic story. Tell people what it is that's happened to you in your life and share it, and it will create relationships beyond anything you could ever imagine.
Julie, what's your final word?
Eric, I think being humble and really understanding the root causes of those stories so that they're applicable to people you share them with, that it's not just about one person, it's about a lesson or something that can have your audience think about an impact on their life.
Jay, what's the final word?
Think more about story listening than storytelling, and think more about the story that you're living, the greater story that's changing with every insight that you gather and every shift that you uncover that orients not only where you're going, but who you're with and the friends that you gather along the way to create a greater story of change in the world.
And there you have the final word. I want to thank you all for being on the show today and joining us both in our interviews as well as on the panel. If you have a question or need advice, connect with us by email, leadership@fullerton.edu, or on Instagram @CSUF_CFL. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show about storytelling. Thanks to our guests, Jay Golden, Julie Hudash, and Eric Goodman for sharing their expertise and insights. We also featured a special leadership lesson about the conversations leaders must have. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice, where industry leaders share insights and best practices. I'm Jay Barbuto, and we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.